Barbara Streisand in The Way We Were.
Oh, great. Look at you. You're very well-rounded. I like this. This is excellent. Yeah.
Because she couldn't get out of her way because of her principles.
Couldn't get out of her own way. That's right.
Yeah.
Didn't have
People
to
are their principles, how
the Rosie Perez does Barbara Streisand is probably going to make the beginning of this podcast. Just want to point that out. This is Talking Pictures, a movie memories podcast from Turner Classic Movies and HBO Max. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Today's guest, Rosie Perez. Rosie got her acting start largely by accident. She was cast in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing after the two met in peculiar fashion at a nightclub. In the film, she plays his character's girlfriend, Tina. She also dances to Public Enemy's Fight the Power in the movie's legendary opening credit sequence. Fight the power! Fight the power! Rosie got an Oscar nomination for her work in Peter Weir's 1993 film Fearless. She has done Broadway and Prestige TV. She's been cast in the upcoming season of White Lotus on HBO. And Rosie is open about her really rough childhood and how hard it is to find your way in Hollywood, especially if you're a woman, a Puerto Rican woman, and a Puerto Rican woman who sounds like Rosie Perez. Here's our conversation. So, who was the first person in this business to tell you to change slightly who you are, whether it was your voice or your look?
I would say the first time it was criticized or talked about was in the press. And that shocked me because I didn't know I had an accent. Do you hear yourself? But then after that, it was, I had gotten this agent, and she wasn't top tier agent, but it was what I could get at the time. And she's the one that told me if I lose the accent, get a nose job, dye my hair blonde, pass more for white, I would get more roles. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And she goes, well, then maybe like if you get darker and then, wear your hair frizzy, you could pass for black. And I said, you're fired.
Okay, I didn't remember that story. I think you told me a version of that story. I was not going for that at all. Everything you mentioned in that made it progressively worse. Like her hole kept getting deeper. That was, yeah. I was really getting at your voice. I was thinking that it was Don Cornelius. I thought, if I heard that right or read that right, that he didn't like your accent.
Yes, he didn't. You're right. I forgot all about that. Yes, oh my God, he hated it. He told me, it sounds like you have a mouthful of marbles. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was like, that's it? And I go, yo, what the fuck you want me to say? Say I fucking sound like I have a mouthful of marbles.
I think about you when I think about my brother sometimes. My brother, who's a Dateline NBC correspondent, he's been doing that for 30 years. He's a great reporter. He's a great big brother. And he, when he has a bit of a nasally voice and he talks a little bit like this, but police tell a very different story. Right. And he's always sort of talked that way.
I know who you're talking about.
Right. Sure. Oh
my goodness.
Yeah. That's Josh Mankiewicz from Dateline NBC. Anyway, so he's the best. And he taught me how to be on TV. He taught me all these things. And I can sound like him sometimes without trying to. But he went to an elocution coach when he was at ABC and was working in New York. I think I might have the times wrong, but early in his career, they sent him to a coach to try and get the nasal thing out of his voice. And he went for a bit, and then he thought some version of, and this was in the 80s, he thought there was some version of, hey man, this is how I sound. And if this doesn't work, then fine, then this career won't work. And even whenever your agent said that, and Don Cornelius was the host of Soul Train, you were a dancer on Soul Train, that's when, put that in perspective for people, that's when that happened. And the business hadn't yet figured out that if you sound like Rosie Perez, which means you don't sound like anybody else, that's not a weakness. That's not the thing to rub out. That's the thing to lean into.
Yeah. Well, I I was just like, this is ridiculous, and I was still going to college. I was a biochem major. So I was like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just go back to school and then have a career in the lab. I didn't want to go in the water because it would mess up my hair. So, so I always thought of myself as being in wearing a lab coat, looking down a microscope. Yeah.
The but I'm like a marine biologist who wants nothing to do with the water. Like, by the way, where did I write that down? Oh yeah. Rosie, in 2014, was it, or did your memoir, right?
Yes.
Because you talked about your hair. Handbook for an Unpredictable Life: How I Survived Sister Renata and My Crazy Mother and Still Came Out Smiling with Great Hair. I obviously take to that title because if I write a memoir, I feel obligated to include my hair in the title.
You got gorgeous hair.
Thank you very much. We have great hair. This is a good hair podcast happening right now. Thank God it's video. So let's go back to some of that early stuff. Then eventually, I won't drag you through everything with your mother and the Catholic Home for Girls. Although I want to get a little bit on it because it is such a key component of who you are. But you're in L.A. at L.A. City College, right, in the 80s when you are seen dancing at a club and they ask you and some friends of yours to come dance on Soul Train, or was it just you?
The talent scout for Soul Train just came to me, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Soul Train, like on TV?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, can my friends come?" And he says, "Are they as hot as you?" I went, "Yeah." And they were. And I introduced them to my girlfriends, and he told us all to show up on, the following Saturday. And we were so excited. We were so excited. And he said, "So show up at the gate and I'll let you in." And when I got to the gate, it was such a sad affair. Everybody was pressed up at the gate, and I didn't understand what they were doing. Everyone was jockeying to get in front. And he came out and he just started pointing, "You, you, you." And I was like, "What?" And I
And
looked at my girlfriends because he was picking like the regular dancers, but it was the people waiting were so desperate to get in. And I just thought it was cruel. And I told my girlfriends, I said, "Let's get out of here." And my girlfriend goes, "I'm not leaving. I want to be on Soul Train." And I said, "Well, then I'm leaving." And I turned, and the town guy goes, "Wait, wait, 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 you, no, 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 don't leave, don't leave." And I said, "Well, this is mean." And he goes, "No, no, I'm going to let you in." I said, "Well, then you have to let my girls in because you told me to bring them." And he let us in. And that kind of set the tone for me at Soul Train, because as I'm walking in, I'm like, I don't like the way this is being handled. I really don't. Da 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 da. He's
you
looking
were
at me
like
like I'm crazy.
you were like the Norma Ray of Soul Train. Uh,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
uh, how much did you make for doing Soul Train?
You got a two-piece Kentucky Fried Chicken lunchbox. That was
But
your payment.
every week you got a new one, right?
Yes.
Wow. So they didn't pay the dancers.
They did not pay the dancers.
Um, so that's a crazy story, crazy story. So I'm going to jump around. I'm going to come back, but then so you're doing that. You're on Soul Train. And how long did you do that for? Like 8 or 9 months, something like that. A while, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Soul Train still drew a big number. So you were getting seen by a lot of people, and including your father.
Yeah.
He was in Puerto Rico.
He was in Puerto Rico, yes.
Yeah. And he saw you on Soul Train and what?
He said, "No, no, 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 no." I remember that, wagging his finger, "No, no, 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 no." And he didn't like the way I was dressed. He didn't like the way I was dancing. And, I was just, he basically told me in a nutshell, he didn't want me to be on the show anymore. And so I didn't return the following weekend.
So what I find really interesting about you is that you are the Norma Ray of Soul Train, and you fired your agent, but your dad told you one time not to do Soul Train anymore, and you were like, "Yep, got it, understood."
That- I'm Puerto Rican. You know what I'm saying? So it's like your father tells you no, 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 no. You say okay, and that's it. It's end of discussion.
and as we're going to learn later, pretty soon about your dad, that's like the one time he told you not to do anything, and then other times when risque stuff happened, like your dad was a huge, stood right next to you, big supporter of yours, right?
Yes, yes. When I did do the right thing, it was, I didn't tell him there was gonna be nudity involved,
That
and
was
I'm
it. First of all, can we just pause there for a second? That was a terrible mistake.
You know what it was, Ben, is that I didn't think like, it'll never get to Puerto Rico. You know what I mean?
I got you. I got you. I
You know,
understand. Like,
because
yeah,
back then, like movies took like years to, a really long time to get to Puerto Rico, and I'm thinking he'll never see it.
right. Or I'll have time later to warn him. Whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get to that. Oh my God, he invited the entire town. He Laguardia, Puerto Rico. And he stood up when the scene came, he stood up and grabbed his heart. And some people said that he was being melodramatic. He really didn't go into cardiac arrest. And some people were like, no, he really went into cardiac arrest. But knowing my father, I think it was a little bit of both. I think he probably had a panic attack and then milked it. you know and so he the ambulance came, of course, and they're wheeling him out, and
So
ladies are crying.
if he milked it, he milked it enough to get an ambulance to come.
Oh yeah, my father was no joke. My father was no joke. And yeah, it was just hilarious. And then I called him. I was crying on the phone, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I should have told you. And he says, it's okay. Next time, if you're gonna do it again, I hope you don't. But next time, if you do it, let's just tell me it's an artistic film. And
Like,
okay.
a little code, father daughter. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I love that he didn't tell you not to do it again. That he was like, no, you're a professional actor. You got to make these decisions on your own. I don't know. I those two stories about don't dance like that on Soul Train, but supporting you. And then, by the way, when you went and saw him in Puerto Rico, right? Was it in Puerto Rico? You went and saw him, and he carried your picture around while taking you to meet everybody.
Oh my God, it was humiliating. First of all, I don't know if I told the story. First of all, when I went to Puerto Rico, and we were touching down in the Rainy base in Aguadilla, and I'm about to get off the plane, and everybody's turning around and saying, "Who are you?" And I said, "What?" My father brought a whole brass band to welcome me to our hometown. I
I
refused
love,
to get off the plane. I was like,
I love.
please, Dad, don't do this, please, please. And he was like, why, please? And then, and he's telling the flight attendants, because I'm watching him. He goes, that's my daughter, Rosie Perez. Yes, yes, that's her. That's my daughter. That's my daughter. And 1, 2, 3. And the band starts going on. I'm going, oh my God. Oh my God. And yeah, but wherever we went, he had the 8x10 stuffed in his wallet. And one time, we went to the airport, um, and and he gives his ID, and with the ID he hands the ticket counter woman the 8x10. She goes, oh no, sir, I don't need this. He goes, yes, you do. You know who that is? That is my daughter. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Oh man, that is a proud father. That is so nice. That is so nice. And
Yeah.
it's I the so I want to get to two things. One, I want to talk about that nude scene a little bit. One, because to me it's such a great. It's only I don't remember nude scenes. I don't care about them. I really don't. That's true. It has such a great line, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're naked because you're not going to have sex. I mean, is the line it's too hot to fuck, or is it too
Mhm.
it's too hot to have sex? Yeah, right. So that, by the way, I got scared that I can't say that. Yeah, it wouldn't have worked. Spike Lee knew it wouldn't have worked if it was too hot to make love.
Right.
That's not a good line. So, uh, and you guys had again, you standing up for yourself. You had gone over with Spike the parameters of the nude scene, and it wasn't like you've never said that he did anything wrong, but it's one thing to go over the parameters of it. But when you were shooting it, you got uncomfortable,
Yes.
and because it just wasn't what you expected. Because how were you going to know what? How would you know what it was, right?
Right.
Until you do it. Um, and you guys are rolling. And a guy who I've gotten to know a little bit, he's been a guest at the TCM Classic Film Festival and the TCM Classic Movie Cruise, who's one of the great guys in this business, Ernest Dickerson, who's also a great cinematographer, now a really good director too. Uh, he stopped the scene, right? Because you were upset. And he was like, we're cutting, even though generally the cinematographer doesn't say when to cut.
Yes. And Ruthie Carter was the costume designer, and she was waiting there with a bathrobe. And I remember that she goes, "Come here, baby." And she just wrapped me up in the bathrobe. And it was just a beautiful moment. It really was. And Spike apologized. And I don't like, we live in such a cancel culture right now. And I don't like when people try to criticize him for that. We were both very young. He was a very young filmmaker. He was a very young man. And, he's learned and he's told people that. But what's the most important thing is that we reconciled immediately,
Yeah, right then. Like you
right
were
then
like,
and there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he was very respectful after that. And, and we're still really good friends to this day.
So now we'll bounce around a little bit more because we'll back up. So what you also so had you already been hired as a choreographer when that happened? Like, because that was from Soul Train that
Yes.
you got offered
Yes.
a chore, right?
Yes.
And
Mhm.
you get offered to be a choreographer for who? You don't know it at the time, but who did it turn out for?
Um, I did not know it at the time because it was top secret. And when I went to the record company, the executive for A&R, Will Silas Jr., said, "Please don't tell anybody, but this is for Bobby Brown of New Edition. He's going solo." And I went, "Oh my God." And he goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh my goodness." And he says, "Okay, so show me the routine." I go, "What routine?" He goes, "The routine that for my artist." I went, "Right." I had no routine made up, nothing. And just the mention of Bobby Brown's name, I was so excited. I made up a routine right there on the spot. And he goes, "Yeah, that's great, but I want one little thing different." I said, "What?" He goes, "You know how you pump down that Soul Train line?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I want in the routine for Bobby Brown to like fuck the air." And I went, "What did you say?" And he goes, I just, just hump it, just hump the air." And I said, "Okay." So if you see my prerogative, all he's doing is humping on the stage because
Oh my!
he couldn't really get the entire routine. So I go, "Just hump. All right. Whatever you don't remember, just hump."
Whatever you lost, just hump the air. The that's and what was your training as a dancer?
The nuns taught me how to tap. Yes, yes, picture it, Ben. A nun in a habit, the full gear going, and the 5, 6, 7, 8. Keep the time.
Uh,
Yeah,
so that's it. That was the extent of your dance training.
yeah,
So you were with the nuns for 6 years.
yeah, about that.
Yeah, like 3 to 9 or four to
Yeah,
nine,
yes.
something around there.
Yeah.
Why were you with the nuns?
Well, I was a love child. My mother and father were married to different people, and they had an affair. And I, you know, I was born, and my father left my mother because she tried to shoot him. Um, there's a reason why I like film noir so much. Um, Uh-huh. And my father goes, if she didn't try to shoot me, I would have still stayed with her." And I'm like, "Dad, you're ridiculous. It's just ridiculous." But she also suffered, that was her so she suffered severely from mental illness. She was a paranoid schizophrenic. And
But
she,
you didn't know any of that at the time, and I'm
no,
not sure. I'm not even sure how many people knew it. They knew she behaved erratically, but
right. Nobody
right,
knew.
yeah.
And when I was born, when I was a week old, she went over to my father's sister's house, my aunt, and said, "I'm going to go to the bodega. I'll be right back." and she didn't come back for 3 years, 3, 4 years. Yeah, she just left me there. So I always thought that my aunt was my mom. And when she came back, um, she ripped me out of my aunt's arms, and only to go on a train with her and take me upstate New York to a convent, to a nunnery, and placed me there.
Like a Catholic home for children.
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, everybody who you tell this to has the same reaction. I'll have the same reaction. I mean, it's madness. It's madness. And you're obvious, and it literally was madness. I'm sure that was her disease convincing her that the aunt was somehow in her way or was a threat to her in some way, or because she didn't even go see you much when she didn't take you to raise you. She took you somewhere else, away from a family and into Sister Renata and the gang.
Yes, and that's when I discovered I had half siblings. I had no idea, because she had put them there too.
And she had a lot of kids, your mom.
She had a lot of
Yeah.
kids. And yeah, and so it was horrible. It was really, really horrible. And you know, most of my half siblings didn't didn't claim me. They were like, she's not our real sister. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible time. Um, but it was also bittersweet, Ben, because I think I get these from my father and my aunt. I always see the sunny side. I will gravitate to the sunny side of the street every single time, even in the depths of despair. And I found my little pockets of joy there. And there were a few nuns that were really, really kind to me and sweet. And there were a lot of volunteers and counselors that were wonderful to me. Um, but the abuse that went on in that place was literally criminal.
And I know things were tough, and I invite everybody to read your book. And it was really, it was worse than Rosie has laid out. And so as I was watched, so then we move forward, you get your career launched. I watched again last night, Fearless. That's you and Jeff Bridges. The two of you are two of a handful or 20 or so survivors of a terrible plane crash. Plane loses hydraulics, crash lands. Most people die, including your little baby that you were holding. But that's a heavy character to play. And was that the first time a role sort of took you back to some of the manner in which you grew up, and some of that loss and some of that aching need for love, which was not available to you?
Well, there was this movie for HBO called Criminal Justice,
Right. Yeah.
starring Forrest Whitaker and Jennifer Grey. And that movie was the first real drama, heavy drama. And it's a little lost, honestly, doing it, because the director, he was really great, but I didn't do my best, but I think I did a fairly decent job. And it wasn't until Fearless where I knew I was ready for a role like this. And they didn't want me. The studio didn't want me at all, because it was Howard Fuhrer, the casting director, who kept insisting to Peter Weir that he see me. And, everybody was like, no, 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 she's not right for this. She's not right for this at all. And he goes, I think she is, because Howard had seen Criminal Justice, that HBO movie. And it says she could pull this off. And yeah, and I finally got an audition. And Howard just looked at me. He goes, you could do this. Just calm down, because I was so nervous. And Peter Weir says, before we read any of the lines, can you lay down and just be like in an extremely depressed catatonic state? And I went, oh, honey, I could do that with my eyes closed. Yeah. Depression, catatonic, yeah. That was really easy for me. And I don't think I ever said this to anybody, Ben. And in that audition, when he goes, okay, that's enough, because he saw that the emotion was starting.
Yeah.
And I sat up, and he goes, are you okay? And I remember I felt like that little girl once again. And I just nodded my head, yes. And he goes, here. And he handed me a tissue. And the tears just came. It just came. And he goes, I have one last thing you. I go, are we going to read? And he goes, no, 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 no. He says, I need to see you pray. I go, why? He goes, just pray. Well, all right. So I was raised in a Catholic church. Okay, this is
Yeah.
easy again. So without even thinking about it, a true Catholic doesn't go in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You go, "Name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Like that. It's like da 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 da. And I saw a little smirk on him when I did that. And when he said, I want you for the role, that he was honest with me. The studio doesn't want you. Kevin Houvain called me first with Jane Berliner. He says, they don't want you, so you have to audition again. And now you have to audition again for the studio. Okay.
Mm.
And he says, put your ego in check. They won't fly you out. Just fly yourself out. Go coach if you don't have the money. This is your part and fight for it. And so I said, okay, I will. And, and when I got there, Peter says, you know why I want you so badly? I said, why? And he goes, you understand loss like nobody I've ever met. And he says, and the way you prayed. I said, what do you mean? He goes, this thing. Da, 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 da. He goes, I never saw that. I said, you haven't met a Catholic? And he was like laughing. And yeah, but I had to audition 4 times for the studio, 4 times. When I remember Jeff Bridges goes, would you just give her the damn role already? This is ridiculous. And I just hugged him, but I really thought, they're going to move on. They're going to move on, and because their main gripe was they didn't want the interracial aspect, because what was original in the script was that there was a love scene. So the compromise was that they took out the love scene.
Right. And instead we get an almost love scene.
Don't look so scared.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared of anything.
Scared to kiss me?
I just did kiss you.
I mean, for real. I remember I learned so much on that film. Jeff Bridges, I was like, what are you doing? He goes, I'm rehearsing. I said, but you're just flailing your hands. He goes, well, what I do is that I rehearse the scene without the dialogue. So then I understand the gesturing that goes along with it. And then I know whether I'm being too self-conscious with the gesturing. And it also helps me with the blocking as well. And I said, well, he goes, let's try it. And I went, because I felt silly. And he goes, come on, let's try it. And we did it. And then we started doing it before every take. And then Peter Weir, he said, I said, that was a bad take. And he says, what do you mean? That was a great take. And I said, I know, but I was faking it. And he goes, that's acting. I said, oh.
Oh,
And he goes, well, that's
yeah.
your technique. I go, I don't have a technique. He goes, oh, you have a technique. You have
Do you
a
think that's
technique.
right?
Yeah.
Do you have a technique? Would you say now you have a technique?
I have a technique in the sense where I didn't understand it at the time, and now I do understand it, and now I have to really allow myself not to be so conscious of it, but it was to let everything go and just be in the moment. And I know that sounds trivial, but that's very hard to achieve.
Totally hard to do.
Very hard to achieve. And so my technique is throw it all away. Just throw it all away. And I would shake and shimmy and just throw it all away. And it reminded me of the lies and the pretending I would do when I was in the children's home with the outside kids. That's what we called kids that were not from the home, that we went to outside school. And the pretending I did, and I at a tender little age created an entire background scenario of my life. And I played that role every single day I went to school, and then I would get busted, and then I would go into a depression, and it was just constant. So I knew how to do that.
And where did that fantasy world come from? Was that just in your head? Was it informed by TV shows you'd seen? I'm going to guess there wasn't a lot of TV there at the monastery, whatever it was. And Had you gone to movies? Had you seen movies? Had you seen? I sort of don't see that as being part of your life.
Yes, they would have movie night. They would have movie night. Do you remember, is it the Bells of St. Mary or one of the
Sure.
Bing Crosby? And they have movie night for the boys, and they have, on the reels, and they're showing. The nuns would do that for us. And I would be transported. I would be taken away. And, when the other kids wanted to go outside and play, that's when the nuns or the counselors would stay inside and watch TV. And I would sneak in and I would just watch. Because do you remember the Saturday afternoon movie?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't grow up in New York, but I know they had it. Yeah.
Oh, and so they would watch those movies. And when I would go home to my aunt's, my aunt loved the movies. And she would tell my cousins to always take me to double features. And I would just be transported, and I would fantasize that I was in those scenarios, that I was that actress living out that life. And it first started with Shirley Temple, um, when she was playing the little princess, and there's all this food and everything like that. But I used to fantasize that I was Shirley Temple.
All right, Rosie, we got to take a quick break, but we're going to come right back and we'll talk a little more, and we'll get to the Super 8 eventually. Rosie Perez coming back momentarily on Talking Pictures. So, well, let's get back to the movies that sort of made you too. So when you'd go back home into Brooklyn with your aunt, then you'd go to see some double features, right?
Yes.
Did the nuns though? Was there ever going out to a movie there? Or was it always movie in house?
Sometimes we would go out to the movies.
Do you
Yeah.
remember going to see? What do you remember going to see?
Oh gosh.
I mean, from
Oh,
any time in this period, it could be
Old Yeller.
Oh, yeah, that was.
Old Yeller, come back, Yeller. Yeah.
Did you
that-
cry?
I cried my eyes
Oh,
out.
of course, you have to.
Oh my God, like snot, type of crying, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And I remember being so angry when I came out of the movie theater, and I said, why'd they do that to the dog? I couldn't get over it. Could not get over it.
What about as you got a little older? Did you remember, like, did you see Rocky in the theater? Did you see?
Oh, yes, I did.
You
Yeah,
did.
because my aunt would, she worked 3 jobs a day, 6 days a week. And so on the weekends, she would give my cousins movie and food money for me, for them to watch me. And they would take me to the movies, but it wasn't PG. And I remember one of my cousins, she goes, we're going to go see a movie. It has your name in it. It's about you. I said, what is it? She goes, it's called Rosemary's Baby. And she's cracking up, because of course that was back in the day, and it was in Brooklyn at the Commodore on Broadway. It was a movie theater there, and you would go to the movies really for air conditioning, because we were so poor, we didn't have AC, and it was so hot, too hot to be outside and go to the movies. And I loved the movies, and I remember seeing that, like, terrified, and she's cracking up. She's smoking a joint inside the theater, and I'm crying. And she can't stop laughing. And then there's other people going, shut your kid up.
So you and I are close in age. In 1977, Star Wars comes. Was that a big deal? Is that the kind of movie that spoke to you, or were you?
No. What spoke to me that had the biggest effect on me when I was younger, believe it or not, was Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, that's great.
And it's because it was the first time I went, oh my God, crossing the bridge. You know what I mean? Like, I would sneak into the city on my own. That's back in the day when they used to let kids just run amok. And my aunt would take me to the Lansing Street to buy the Easter coat. And sometimes we would stand outside of Radio City Music Hall. We couldn't afford to go in, but we would say, I don't know why we did that. We just stood outside Radio Music Hall, and and everything. So the city to me was such a like distant, big deal. And I didn't understand at the time how small town Brooklyn was. And when I saw Saturday Night Fever, I understood my angst. I understood why I wasn't satisfied with what was going on. You know what I mean? I love Brooklyn. I still live in Brooklyn, but I wanted to cross the bridge. I wanted to cross the damn bridge. I wanted something else. And I just didn't want to be the local hero on the block. And that's what Saturday Night Fever meant to me. And just to see, you know, I had such a crush on John Travolta. Oh my God, with Vinnie Barbarino. Oh my God, forget about it. You know, and that was the only reason why I went to go see Saturday Night Fever.
That's
Really, it wasn't the dancing
because of Welcome Back, Kotter.
because of Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah.
And you know, and it just has such a profound effect on me because I was like, yeah, because I related to the girl more than I relate, and I related to John Travolta's character, but I also related to the girl's character because I also used to see so many girls like act so pretentiously like I'm a city girl, and they weren't. They were from Queens. Like, shut up, you're from Queens. You can't hide that accent, you know. And but it was just so impactful to me, you know. But he still loved Brooklyn, you know, when he's down by the water and he traces the Verrazano with his finger. That's love for the borough.
Yeah, and that's still because it's still his home, right? That's still
Yes,
home.
it's
Yeah,
still home
and you can want something else and still love home.
and still love home. That's it, you know. And that was when I was younger, that was probably one of the most impactful movies. And the other one was Double Indemnity. Blew me away.
Where'd you see Double Indemnity?
I saw Double Indemnity at somebody's home. I was invited. I used to have a volunteer. They call them Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and they were like rich people that
Yeah,
had philanthropic hearts and cared about the less fortunate, and they would take you on trips. And I remember she took me to Radio City Music Hall. I saw the Rockettes and the Christmas show. And, she would take me to a lot of different places. And I remember she took me to this person's house in Pound Ridge in Westchester County. And they had the old fashioned movie reel, and they played Double Indemnity. And I loved it.
what'd you love? Did you love Barbara?
I loved the audacity of Barbara Stanwyck's character. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my goodness. And it was that's when I fell in love with film noir because the intelligence and the ruthlessness that she portrayed, I was like, oh my goodness. This was just amazing to me. And Fred McMurray, like what a sap. You know
What?
he played it
What a
so
sap.
well.
Right.
So well. And it
I think it helps enormously that he knows it. Like he's narrating it he's like, hey man, you're about to hear a story told by a sap.
exactly.
Right. Like this is how I got played.
Yeah.
He's a crazy sort of guy, quick-tempered. I kept hammering into him that she was with another man, so I'd go into one of his jealous rages, and then I'd tell him where she was. And you know what he would have done to her, don't you, Walter?
Yeah. And for once I believe you, because it's just rotten enough.
We're both rotten.
Only you're a little more rotten.
And it just tickled my fancy because that was one thing that the nuns wouldn't stand for was audacity. They would not stand for it, and individuality.
Yeah, well, you bring both those to the table, even at an incredibly young age, right?
Yeah, I guess. And then
you guess?
Yeah. Cheeky little devil. And but I was, I just remembered that it's like, yay, even though she was vile and ruthless and just
Oh yeah, no, you're on her side even when you don't want to be on her side. And
but it showed me strength.
that's right. That's right. So when do you start thinking to yourself that I'm going to be a professional actress?
I started thinking that when it was the premiere of Do the Right Thing, and I went, and I was very intimidated by the red carpet. I did not like it at all.
Do you
Felt ver-
still hate it? It's pretty
yes,
terrible. Yeah, it's
yeah,
pretty.
I felt very awkward.
It's so very artificial.
Yeah, and I'm sitting in the theater, and all of a sudden, my scientific mind gets electrified. Because now I'm saying, oh, this is the magic of movie making. Now I see it, like everything put together, and the movie brought me to tears. And I sat there, and everyone's like, come on, we got to go to the after party. And I couldn't move. I just sat there, and I just said to myself, this is it. This is what I was meant to do. Spike was right. And I tried to go back to school. My head just wasn't in it. And that was a very difficult conversation I had to have with my aunt. She cried and cried and cried. And I said, no, I'm going to do this. And she says, but I don't want you to be poor. Like, we are also poor. And I said, I am not going to be poor. There's no way. And I asked my dad, and I was scared to tell him too. And he went, wonderful, yes, yes, oh my goodness. And he was just ecstatic about it. And that gave me a lot of courage to move forward because I had his support.
Yeah, of course it did. That's and you'd craved that your whole life, right? And you're fine, and at least you get it. But I know that the mistake to make is that if you're like, I'm getting this now from my father. My aunt's here and my father's here, and they're both supportive, and I got cousins who love me, but you're still, those things still happen, and you're still fundamentally broken. And even though you start having a pretty big career and you're landing the HBO movie and you get Fearless and you get White Men Can't Jump, I'll ask you about that in a sec. But you're still, those things still happen and you're still not dealing with it.
Yes, I felt very empty. I felt very, very empty. And I remember after the Oscars, it was such a crash. And especially my manager at the time said, now you're going to have the Oscar jinx. I said, what's that? She said, well, you didn't win, so you probably won't get any roles anymore.
Because you got nominated for that role we were talking about in Fearless. You got Best Supporting
Yes.
Actress nomination, yeah.
And I was so angry at her. And I was so tired of the racism and the prejudice and the sexism that you have to deal with as a person of color in Hollywood. And I just didn't know if I could keep doing it. And I went home to Puerto Rico and I sat on the beach with my father. And he was so proud of me and he was so happy for me. And I said, would you be okay if I'm not Rosie Perez anymore? He goes, what? I said, if I just stop. And he turned and he smiled. He goes, but you are Rosie Perez. And you'll always be Rosie Perez. And whatever you do, I got you. If you want to stop, stop. I don't think you should. And he says, but it doesn't matter to me. I love you. And we just sat there on the beach. I remember on Crash Post Beach in Agua de Air, and we watched the sunset. We went and got an ice cream. And I couldn't stop crying. And, he just kept rubbing my back and just telling me, then starts telling me funny jokes or his many affairs with women to make me laugh. I remember at least one woman, oh my God, her feet used to stink. He was like that, and, just as I knew that it would be okay if I moved forward or did not move forward. And basically he was telling me, it's your choice, whatever you want to do it, and he was also telling me, don't let them win. Don't let this, all the obstacles that you have to go through, it pales in comparison to all the obstacles that you had to go through and endure as a child.
All right, we're going to take one more quick break with Rosie Perez. We'll come back with Super 8. Stick around. Right back. Okay, so Rosie Perez, Super 8. What's your most memorable movie watching experience?
Cool Hand Luke.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
It's a good one because it's about
Did you see it
this.
in a theater?
I saw it in a theater.
First run? So like you saw it when you were like 7 years old, or would it have been later?
No. I was older.
Okay.
I was older when I saw it. And I saw it with a couple of the girls that were in the group home. And I remember just sitting there watching it and understanding this is about control. This is about being institutionalized. This is about power. And this is about killing the individual spirit. And it was so impactful. It was so impactful to me. And what's that famous line? So we
What
gotta
we have,
sit your what
what
we
we have here
have
is a
here.
failure to communicate. Yeah.
Yes.
Wish you'd stop being so good to me, Captain. Don't you ever talk that way to me. Never! Never! What we've got here is failure to communicate.
And I was like, oh, do I understand that line? And and then when he gets shot in the end for that, it's just like, and then when he's driving away and that hint to smile and the car goes over the sunglasses, you know what I mean? It was just like, wow. And I remember it brought me to tears, but it wasn't heartbreak tears. It was tears of like, yes, till the very end,
Well, I mean, this is you felt seen in that movie, right? I mean, that was okay. He's in prison. He's this white guy in a southern prison, but you're this Puerto Rican girl kept in the same kind of prison, right? And where he's trying to crush where your individuality's being crushed, right? So that makes sense to me that would speak to you. It really does.
You're good, Ben Mankiewicz.
Oh, come on, that was a layup.
That was good. I didn't know. I wasn't trying to get no. That wasn't an intended layup. That was like an alley-oop there.
All right, well,
That's what
good.
that
I'm
was
glad I was
there.
able to complete the alley-oop.
Yeah.
Right? And there was defense there, so that was good.
Uh,
Okay, so you have to get do you have tattoos?
no.
You have to get a tattoo of a movie line, or it could be a movie title, anything, something having to do with a movie, but think about a line maybe. What would it be?
From Some Like It Hot at the end. Nobody's perfect.
Joey Brown.
Joey
Right.
Brown. Yes, Joey
Yeah.
Brown. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Well, nobody's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And that cracked me up, and I just love that. I love that line. And, I actually use it in my life when I do something, that so
Right.
I was like, well, nobody's
Right.
perfect.
All right. Nobody's perfect. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
no, it's a great line. It's a great ending to that movie. Great little ending to that movie. What movie would you show a date or somebody you're interested in?
I would show them Detour.
Oh, sure.
Because if they don't get it or they don't stay with it, nah.
That's Edgar Ulmer's classic, like 75-minute noir.
Is it 75 minutes?
It's not long. It's not 90. It's not 90. I don't know. I'm struck. It's one of those movies like Kubrick's Paths of Glory, where I feel like I've watched a 3-hour movie. Like I've been hit with a good 3-hour movie, and then you realize the whole thing took 89 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there a movie villain you relate to or you think is misunderstood?
Almost anything that Ida Lupino has been in.
Yeah. Okay.
She's a very good, complicated villain where she also comes off as the victim as well. which is crazy to play. Let me think.
And she was directing movies as a woman in Hollywood when basically nobody else was.
Yeah.
All right, this for this question, you're a thief. Is a warehouse, big, vast warehouse, props and costumes for every movie ever. You can steal one thing. What do you take?
The sunglasses of Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity.
Well, that's a great answer. Quick. I like it. What movie makes you cry without fail?
Movie makes me cry without fail. There's so many. Oh, man. The one that makes me cry without fail that went right into my head is Barbara Streisand in The Way We Were.
Oh, great. Look at you. You're very well rounded. I like this. This is
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah.
Because she couldn't get out of her way because of her principles.
Couldn't get out of her own way. That's right.
Yeah.
Didn't have to
People
compromise.
are their principles, how about?
The Rosie Perez does Barbara Streisand is probably going to make the beginning of this podcast. Just want to point that out, because that probably gets itself into the first minute. That was good. What movie makes you laugh without fail?
Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, me too. Okay, this one, let's go. This is supposed to be your mom and dad's favorite movie, but I don't care what your mom's favorite movie is. So what about your aunt? Did your aunt have a favorite movie?
Oh, she was a lover of movies. She's the one that turned me on to Barbara Stanwyck, but she would call her Barbara Stanwyck. She never pronounced the K at the end. My father's favorite movie was the one, I don't remember the movie. It's the one with the Nicholas brothers when they come down the stairs.
Oh, where they do the dance that you would think would make them unable to father children.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, it's insane.
It's insane. What is that movie?
Yeah, it's in stormy weather.
And Cab Calloway's in that.
And Cab Calloway's that scene. In that scene, he's like begins that scene that ends with them coming down the stairs and doing the splits. So look, man, Fred Astaire was a great dancer. Gene Kelly, obviously, Ginger Rogers, Eleanor Powell. These are great. Ann Miller. These are great dancers. But you're insane if you don't, at a bare minimum, include the Nicholas brothers in every one of those conversations, and probably put them like they're right there with Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, like they're first or second, man. They were unbelievable.
Yes. So my father was a jazz lover and a music lover, and Cab Calloway was one of his favorites. And so he said, the Nicholas brothers upstaged Cab Calloway. He always says that every time we watch the movie.
They totally. They upstaged. They won the whole movie over. It's an amazing thing. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right. Last question is it's the Rosie Perez wildcard question. As a boxing fan, right? And this is not so much a boxing movie fan, but as a boxing fan, a serious boxing fan, a no messing around boxing fan, is there an untold box? Because when it comes to sports movies, there are more good boxing movies than anything else. And it's not close. It's not close. There's so many great boxing movies. Is there an untold story, an untold boxing story that you'd like to see told?
Right here.
No.
Blood and I can't believe you asked me that question. Blood and Hate. Blood and Hate.
Blood and Hate?
Yes, Blood and Hate. It's about my favorite boxer in the whole wide world, Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He was a reluctant civil rights hero because of his fight against Alan Minter, the UK, the British world champion. He went over to Britain to fight him to win his title. And Alan Minter was a member of the National Front, which was a white supremacist organization. And he said into the press something to the effect of, there's no way that black man's going to beat me. Ain't no black man's going to beat me. And Marvin Hagler handled it with such dignity, would not respond to it. All he did was lift up his fist. He goes, I'll let these do the talking. He went over there to the UK, to Wembley Stadium. It was sold out primarily filled with members of the National
They're
Front.
just National Front guys.
Yes.
These
And-
hooligans. Yeah.
And Marvin Hagler went over there with his family and his manager and boxing trainer that he had all his life. And he wins that the referee stops the fight, I think in the 4th or 5th round, because he was beating Alan Minter so badly. It was horrific. And when he finally went to have his moment of glory and he sunk down to the canvas with his arms raised in victory, bottles and everything just starts being hurled at him in the ring, and there was a riot ensued. And they had to sneak him out. And what did he do? He went back to his dressing room, and he would not say one disparaging word about Alan Minter.
Well, I didn't know that story at all. And you're right. That is a great, great story that ought to be told.
It ought to be told.
Right. Produced by Rosie Perez. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Rosie Perez, as always, this has been a thrill. Thank you so much for talking to me and taking so much time and sharing so much of yourself. You're the best.
Oh, so I could talk to you for hours. Oh. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rosie.
Bye-bye.
I have interviewed Rosie before on Turner Classic Movies, and I was in the audience for a live conversation she had with TCM's Noir Alley host, Eddie Muller. She is exactly the kind of person who gets me excited about movies. I mean, her expertise is vast, but it never comes across like she's teaching a class. It is all passion with Rosie, as if whatever movie she's talking about, she just saw for the first time. I hope you guys felt what I felt when she told the Saturday Night Fever story. She leaned toward me, even though, I get it, we weren't in the same place. And she said how it made her want to cross the bridge into Manhattan. Come on. I've never had strong feelings about Saturday Night Fever, but now, because of Rosie, I'm thinking about it in a totally different way. I don't know if what she said made me love Saturday Night Fever, but it sure made me want to defend it going forward. That, I think, is the impact Rosie Perez has on a person. James Kim is the showrunner of Talking Pictures. The managing editor is Darby Maloney. Video editor is Andrew David Lewis. Tori Stegman is our talent producer. Additional talent booking by Noea Murphy. Glenn Matullo mixes every episode. Set design by Raphael Laurier and Leanne Reagan-Barnes. Angela Carone is our director of podcasts at TCM. Team at HBO Max Podcasts, that's executive producer Michael Gluckstad, senior producer Allison Cohen-Sirokach, and producer Kenya Reyes. The HBO Max Concept and Design Studio, Marta Duarte Diaz, Karen Guan, and Kendall Thomas. Production support from Jaco Friedman, Liz Winter, John Renault, and Kristen Hassel, and special thanks to Julie Baton. That's our show. You can watch this podcast on HBO Max and YouTube, as well as listen to it wherever it is you listen to podcasts. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. See you next time.